controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are ASAP Science here to make things make sense.
Erectile dysfunction.
That's what we're talking about today.
It's defined as an inability to achieve or maintain a sufficient erection to engage in sexual intercourse.
And I think it is much more common than people think. And even if it's not a chronic issue, I think a lot of people experience, or a lot of people with penises experience moments where they're like either can't get hard or too nervous or too drunk. And so like there's lots to talk about here beyond it just being like, you know, obviously as people age, this becomes a more prominent issue in their lives, but it can affect you at any point in your life.
But also it's just like erectile dysfunction in young men has increased so much. Go to asapscience.com to watch the video, which comes out tomorrow, if you listen to this, the day it comes out. And there's so many ads now. The reason I started thinking about this was like my bro friends who are like, yeah, like every sports game has an ad for Blue Chew, which is essentially, I think Viagra or Cialis or something became a drug that other people can sell or something. Like it doesn't have to just be Viagra now.
Yeah, there's like off-brand names.
And so all these young people are taking it and it's like being marketed in a different way because there's a lot of erectile dysfunction in young men. Mm-hmm. The reason for that we'll talk about today, but it's just a really popular thing to do, to take medication to help with your erections. And so we want to talk about why everyone seems to be talking about that.
Yeah, so we will talk about today what erectile dysfunction does, like some stats around it, as well as obviously you know the name Viagra, which is the drug sildenafil, but there's also Cialis that's really popular, which is tadalafil. And we'll go into like the mechanisms of how those work, as well as like some science around what's going on culturally.
So one study found that there's a 4-fold increase in erectile dysfunction for men in their 70s compared to their 20s. So it's like, okay, obviously it increases as you age. It's traditionally been considered a disease of old age. However, contemporary evidence suggests a growing incidence of ED in men younger than 40, of which there are 3 significant studies. In 1999, it was 5%. Then there was one study in 2018 that found it was 34% of
like the prevalence
of men under 40 were saying, self-proclaiming they had trouble maintaining an erection. So like that's a huge increase. And then also this year, 2025, they expect that 322 million men will be affected by erectile dysfunction, up from 152 million men in 1995. So it's doubled.
Wow.
Which is just like really
between
crazy.
95
and now.
Okay.
And then there are 2 reasons for ED, which is psychogenic or organic. And the psychogenic one is the part that is more related to younger people's ED.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. The organic one is like hormonal, arterial, and that's more of an aging thing.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I think a lot of times, even in studies, if somebody does have a hard time getting an erection, the question is, can you still get it in your sleep? Because a lot of times, like men, there's a Sex and the City episode on that.
Oh yeah, she like wraps his cock with something,
with like a piece of paper to see if that night it rips.
If someone was wrapping my cock while I was napping, I would wake up.
No, that's messed up also.
It's messed up, but also it's like no one sleeps through someone wrapping their cock with a paper. Anyways.
Yeah. But just to say, like, obviously in those situations, it may be, like you said, psychogenic. It could be nerves. It could be in your head. It could be a lot of different reasons.
Porn.
But if when you're sleeping biologically, you're able to get erections, which often happen like through your sleep cycle multiple times.
It's called penile tumescence. Remember? What is it? Penile nocturnal.
Yeah.
Penile tumescence is just boner at night.
And it's related to why you often, or not always, wake up with morning wood, because it's like a natural occurrence for your body to like have an erection many times through the night. And sometimes you wake up out of that sleep stage, and so you just have an erection. Not always, but when you do, that's because you've come out of that sleep stage where your body is sort of like naturally filling your penis with blood. Because it's sort of healthy to kind of like oxygenate and get blood flowing through there.
Yeah, I like really worry about that. Not to get so personal, but sometimes I'm like, where's my morning wood?
And I'm like, when will mine go away?
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like, well, I don't know if we want to get into the biking statistics immediately or should go into Viagra and Cialis, but I have a lot to think about in regards to my arm being shattered from my bike and how much I bike.
Well, you're here. Let's talk about it now. Then we'll jump into like the drugs.
Okay, so this is a really scary... I wrote bike and gulp as my main note.
Gulp?
Yeah. And so I think that I'm like, should I make a video on this or like a TikTok or whatever? We're here now. Let's just do it. So they studied 160 cyclists. These were Norwegian bicycle cyclists. Like they were on like a tour. Like they're pretty intense cyclists. And 21% of the men reported penile numbness, with 13% admitting to symptoms of temporary impotence after biking.
Penile numbness.
Yes. So the whole point is, it's like, okay, like obviously when you're biking, it's like a very specific thing. You're like essentially like messing your gooch so hard. You're just like slamming your gooch. Like people walking, people running, people not sitting on it. Like it's just an interesting little like place for a thing to be just like shattering your bottom of your cock.
I know, like even outside of pleasure and these things, there's been a lot of conversations also around like sperm count and stuff for people who are seated on a bike seat for many hours.
So
a day or week or whatever.
This cross-sectional study found that men who ride bicycles more than 3 hours per week have an increased risk of developing ED. And I definitely bike way more than 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
Like I commute on my bike. I honestly, like in the summer, like I love it, but I probably spend up to an hour to 2 hours biking per day. When I actually think about how I use my bike.
Yeah.
So that's like adding up to
like, I'd be curious to know, like, because my instinct originally was these kind of studies, especially the ones that I've looked at, were on people who like do professional biking or off-road biking, and they'll be biking for like hours at a time.
But that's what I'm doing. That's what road bike people are doing.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're not. I'm not trying to like diminish your claim, but I'm also thinking about you like, could there be a difference when you're doing it in 20-minute spurts? Like you might be doing a few hours a day, but you're going 20 minutes here, then you're like, you know, you're at your school or you're at your gym or you're at wherever, then you're biking 20 minutes somewhere else.
But it just says 3 hours.
Weekly,
3 hours per week.
Yeah, that seems very low.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like I don't think that it should just be people who do road bike, because I know people who road bike, they do it in the morning and then they're done for the day. I'm using my bike
as your
all
main
day.
mode of transportation.
So I commute to the gym. That's 20 minutes. From the gym to school is 20 minutes. Then I'll go do some errands, which will probably be like 40 minutes, and then I'll go home 40 minutes, and I'll go to dinner, which is 20. Like
it adds up.
It adds up a lot, and they said that they like it has to do with the like perineal pressure from the bicycle seat, which like essentially like stops the penile vessels from like
blood
ruptures
flow and
them.
stuff.
And then there's arterial insufficiency, which causes an upregulation of the connective tissue, essentially like build vascular smooth muscle and like connective tissues that essentially inhibit the blood. And then all of those mechanisms together disrupt functional penile compliance, leading to ED. So I'm just like,
I mean, it's worth
not
knowing.
like it's not something I should think about. If I'm
100%,
like, where's my boner in the morning?
And anyone out there, like obviously there's lots, and we're going to even talk about the role of like porn and the internet and like societal factors of like stress that may come into play. But maybe we take a break now and I'll talk a little bit about the drugs that can help or that people use to manage erectile dysfunction.
Yeah. Ooh, take a break. Like you just like worked in a break, like for an ad break.
No, I meant like take a break from talking about.
But we could do it like, let's do an ad break, and when we come back, Viagra and Cialis. Ding.
But do we do ad breaks?
No, leave it pause.
Okay, so let's talk about the main drugs that are used to address erectile dysfunction.
So the things that I'm gonna have like sent to me by the bucket loads at this point, Mr.
Let's get sponsored. Yeah, okay. Hello, Viagra. Hello,
Hi,
Cialis.
Viagra. I bike more than 3 hours a week, and I need this because my
they should have a biking
dick stopped
campaign.
working. Literally.
Slash a porn campaign, slash a stress campaign.
Yeah.
We can market for you. So, okay, Viagra, otherwise known as sildenafil, and Cialis, otherwise known as tadalafil. These are kind of like the two main drugs, but they have the same mechanism of action, basically, with minor differences. I remember hearing in the past that people thought they were like completely different mechanisms of actions. They do have different impacts, which we'll talk about. Would you rather me speak of them in terms of Viagra and Cialis or sildenafil and tadalafil?
Viagra and Cialis.
Okay, just know like this is related to the generic version of the drug.
Yeah. Which you can get when you're like seeing an ad for Blue Chew or Phoenix, or I was like, okay, clearly my phone thinks I have ED. Am I watching bike link videos? Because I get these ads all the time, but there'll be like Felix Blue Chew. It's like that will be either Viagra or Cialis.
Yeah.
Sildenafil or Tadalafil. You have to look that up yourself because there's a lot of names for them.
Yeah,
now.
to clarify, they're not Viagra or Cialis. Those are the brand names. It's kind of like Advil is ibuprofen, and you can get a generic version of ibuprofen that's not branded Advil. It's not related to Advil. They just use the same active ingredient. Okay. You know, I was going to say I also love the name Tadalafil more because it's kind of like tada, fill the penis.
Wow.
That's how I was remembering it.
Yeah, that is
okay.
great.
So both of these drugs are called PDE5 inhibitors. Now, I won't go through like the whole mechanism of how they work, but they both enhance the effect of nitric oxide, which is very important when it comes to erections.
That's so random.
Yeah, but nitric oxide has, and we've talked about it in some older videos, even about like nocturnal erections, and we have lots of videos on like orgasms and
We
stuff.
have lots of videos on dicks.
Yeah, and vaginas, and clitorises, and all these kinds of things. So make sure you go back to like the classic ASAP science. But basically, nitric oxide starts a chain reaction that ultimately triggers something called cyclic GMP. I don't want to get too technical just because it's like a podcast and I feel like it's hard to visualize.
And
these
we're
things.
not the Huberman Lab, okay?
This is supposed to be easy and fun and gay. Okay, basically this increases blood flow to the penis. It causes smooth muscle relaxation. But normally PDE5 breaks down cyclic GMP. And so as you could probably imagine, these drugs like Viagra and Cialis work as a PDE5 inhibitor.
So they increase cyclic GMP.
Yeah, or they stop. It's not getting broken down as fast.
It's like staying.
So, which is obviously like a chemical. Like when we're talking about, okay, obviously part of erectile dysfunction can be not psychosomatic, but what did you call it? Like you're able to like you're
the mic.
Oh yeah,
Psychogenic.
So your mind can play a big part in this, and that's an important thing to know is that these drugs don't give you spontaneous erections.
That's like really important to know because like all the jokes from like the movies in the 90s is like, oh, he took Viagra, and it's like Jim Carrey like
walking
knocking a
around
light
with a
over with
boner.
like his with his cock. It's like it doesn't just give you an erection, you have to be aroused.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important for people to understand. You don't just take it and get a boner. You have to take it, and then you have to still. The most important sex organ in your body is your brain. People love to say that. So there you go.
And obviously, it's like once the blood flows in your penis, because of that mental stimulation or physical arousal or sensual smells or whatever, things can get you aroused, then it's easier to keep that erection. It's more likely to be firm because that cyclic GMP is not getting broken down. But of course, there can still be mental barriers. So it's not like these drugs don't work for everyone. And that's important to experiment with a doctor. Okay. What are the differences between these drugs?
Yeah, because they do the same thing, but
They do the same thing. So both work within 30 minutes to an hour.
So you take them and then you wait and then you start thinking about it and then you hopefully get cock hard.
So
whoa, what?
the interesting thing is like Viagra is more like, and I'll say the name again, sildenafil, is more like you take it because you know you're about to have sex in like half an hour to an hour.
Fun.
And it will last from 4 to 6 hours.
Really fun.
Whereas Cialis, sometimes dubbed the weekend drug, weekend pill rather, can last up to 36 hours.
Whoa.
Because its half-life of like being broken down in your body is
interesting.
way longer. So it's less...
I feel like gay guys talk about Cialis way more, and now I get why.
Yeah, because it's like if you're going to have a weekend where you're planning to hook up and you don't want to have to carry Viagra around
It's because gay guys are so weekend hookup.
It's not just gay people.
No, but like it's funny because I just feel like as we're getting up there in our 30s and we're gay men and it's like all of a sudden people start talking about drugs and partying and all of a sudden people start mentioning Cialis and you're like, that's kind of interesting, but they're not mentioning Viagra. And now I'm realizing it's because it's like
they
gay guys are
through
so
longer.
like the weekend's coming. Like they're not even knowing if they're going to have sex, when they're going to have sex, because you can have sex at all times when you're a gay guy.
Well, I mean, you can have sex at all times if you're a straight guy or a girl or a straight or lesbian.
But you know what I'm
or,
saying.
Yes.
I get why they're doing Cialis, not Viagra.
Yes.
Because they're like,
And
this weekend I might get laid.
another interesting thing about Cialis is you can be prescribed low dose Cialis that you would take every day. So if you're somebody who
Whoa.
does suffer from like chronic erectile dysfunction,
Wait, that's slay.
you would take a lower dose and then you kind of like your body is always sort of prepped for a sexual experience and you don't have to think about it so often. You don't have to carry meds with you.
So you're just always taking a bit of Cialis?
Yeah. And then it's just like in your body. So that would help with your erections.
That makes me feel better about my inevitable ED from exploding my gooch on my bike every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, you know what? You're talking about like this in the gay community, but I think even more broadly in the heterosexual community, like these kind of problems are still carry a lot of shame, but are much more easy to talk about.
Yeah, and actually, I shouldn't just say gay. It's just because that's who I hear it
Where
from in
we're
personal
around.
life. But
Yeah.
like my Instagram ads is just like girls being like, when my boyfriend got a hold of Blue Chew,
That's
the
her
way
Instagram
he pounded me. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, obviously
It's
girls
everywhere, yeah.
and straight guys are also taking this.
And there's a comfort around talking about this as an issue that many men experience in varying degrees. Some people might just want it to help their sex life. Maybe they don't have like quote unquote severe erectile dysfunction, but they might feel less confident, or maybe they want to be able to have an erection for longer and feel like I'm only able to last a little bit if I take Cialis or if I take Viagra. I can like have longer sex, have more fun with my partner, et cetera, et cetera.
Because that is when it comes to how so many young people have ED now, that's the type that they have. They get an erection, but they can't maintain it.
Yeah, and I think that's like pretty normal. I think the other day we were listening to a pod, and it's like the average length of sex is actually only like 5 or 6
No,
minutes.
it's like
People,
both men and women claim that they
It's
like
longer.
want it to be longer, and
Yeah.
then they actually ask, what do you actually think it is for you? And they say like 5.6 minutes.
Yeah. So it's like most people, it's like when you're wanting to have a longer sexual experience, like you're not pushing your body, but it probably is harder to keep an erection for a long period of time.
Erections are like the most annoying. Like there's so much male privilege, but like boners are annoying to have for sex.
Yes, they can be.
That's why being gay is so great, because you could just bottom and just realize like, wait, we have a vagina and a dick.
Well, we don't have a vagina. We have an ass.
Yeah, you're right.
So I want to also clarify that like Viagra should not be taken every day. It is not the same
Interesting.
as Cialis.
Whoa, cool. Okay.
And so, and these drug doses are very different, not because they are just different actions and mechanisms. So like, don't take the milligram prescription from one and apply it to the other. Obviously, you need to be talking to a doctor or physician if you're going to start using this on a regular basis. Another interesting fact to know is that Viagra is affected by fatty foods, and so it's much better to take on an empty stomach for it to work. Whereas I think Cialis, you don't have to worry as much about that, especially if you're taking it on a more regular basis, because it lasts in your body so much longer. I guess the only other thing, well, we can talk a little bit about side effects. Like, it's worth knowing there are
I want to know about side effects.
Yeah, there's some very common side effects, which include headaches, flushing, nasal congestion, heartburn.
I won't name names, but someone we know did take Cialis on a trip, and then the next day was like, I feel
overheating.
so sick, and I'm like, it's the Cialis, and I remember being like, what are you talking about? You're obviously just like sick because we're in Mexico and it's hot and you ate something wrong. And then now I'm like, wait, no, it easily could have been the Cialis.
100%. And we were in a hot climate, and it's, it can definitely, if headaches and flushing are like a major part of this, that could easily, in a new environment where it's like way hotter than your body's used to, like make you feel
Also,
much
that
different.
person didn't get laid. And it's like, there's something really like frustrating about like, it's like
Taking a
taking
med.
prep and like never having sex. It's like,
Yeah.
taking a Cialis pill for the weekend is so much worse if the Sunday
That's
comes
why-
and you have
yeah.
you have heartburn and nasal congestion and you didn't even get laid.
Maybe that's why it's like, not that I'm promoting taking it all the time. Obviously, this is based on your own personal experience, but then you're not thinking about it as much. If it's just part of your regular routine, it's not like I'm doing it because I'm anticipating.
Wow. Okay, master's students, interesting study. Do people who take Cialis have more sex because they feel the pressure too?
I have an interesting study coming up, not answering that question, but I will mention it shortly, that I found really interesting. Okay. Tadalafil, which is Cialis, you're more likely to have muscle aches, whereas sildenafil, which is Viagra, you're more likely to have vision problems.
What?
Yeah, and I think there's like a condition where you like lose some of your color vision, and then it's like if that happens to you, you need to stop taking it immediately.
Oh my God. I didn't know that.
There are some much more rare but serious conditions that can pop up. Again, extremely rare in even all
but
the
it's
trials.
definitely talk to your doctor vibes. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
There's something called priapism. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. That's when you have an erection for over 4 hours. And
Priapism.
yeah.
I think you mean Prism, Katy Perry's album.
Oh, I got scared. I'm like,
no,
did I
just
say
was
it?
like, I am in so much pain. Like, I can't even. I'm just realizing
'Cause of
my
your arm?
hurts so
Oh,
much. Like,
no.
I was like, I'm gonna make a Prism Katy Perry joke. Like, that's not even like that's cognitively off.
Oh, I'm sorry, your arm hurts so much.
I also
Are you okay?
We'll go back to priapism. Sorry, but also there's
How do
like
you say that
there's
word?
nothing more unhorny than being in pain. Like all this talk of you being like hard erection, like on another day during the podcast, I'd be like, oh, I'm horny.
Priapism. Thanks, Google.
Like all this talk of even just like the idea scientifically of like a hard cock, I'd be like, oh my God. But I'm literally in so much pain that I'm like nothing. I'm feeling nothing.
100%. Maybe you have a little empathy for people who suffer from chronic pain now.
Yeah, no, that's true. I've always had empathy for that, except for Lady Gaga.
Except for me.
Oh yeah, I always forget that you have that.
Well, like I've worked through a lot of it, and I'm in a much better place now. I used to have so much back
Whenever
pain
I
all the
see
time.
Lady Gaga perform now, I'm like, how's your what did she have?
Don't.
No, I know.
Don't be mean to her.
I know. What? It's like, what is wrong with me? Why am I trying to have
You're
a gay,
in chronic pain now.
have
You
a
need
gay
to be
podcast and say
empathetic.
anything wrong about Lady Gaga?
Yeah, no, that's really sad.
We're on a side note. Her most recent Netflix performance, incredible. I immediately want to buy
Yeah.
tickets to her show.
She's incredible. I'm so proud of her.
Should we buy tickets?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
We
Anyways,
should.
back.
Okay. Other serious, again, that priapism is like much more likely with overdose. Like you're not likely to have that happen to you. Again, vision and hearing loss have been reported as rare conditions. And then a warning that you should know about if you are taking any other drugs with nitrates, which are often for
Like heart
angina,
stuff?
like which is what actually Viagra was originally developed for.
Oh,
was like
so
heart problems.
poppers.
Yes.
Sorry.
Or anything with alpha blockers. Like you can't take these drugs.
This is why these drugs become very scary for people like having group sex, like gay men, is that a lot of them will have been doing other drugs and
Yeah.
then they slip in this Viagra Cialis because they're doing other drugs and then they can't get hard from those other drugs, and it like can have really complicated issues with your whole blood system that you have to be so careful, and people need to know that these drugs are not.
Yeah, not to just be like taken without educating yourself.
Yes.
Especially if you're going to be taking other drugs, drinking. Like it's just
Poppers.
worth knowing which drugs are safe to take together.
Yeah.
Because this feels like a casual drug. It's a prescribed drug or a drug you have access to.
It has a light vibe. It's like
Yeah, but
ads
it's that
on
same
TV.
thing. Like you, by taking a drug with nitrates and then taking Viagra, your blood pressure can drop so low that because it's vasodilating everywhere that can actually cause death. So
Yeah.
just like
Oh
worth
my God,
knowing
yes.
that. Okay, the one last meta-analysis I want to look at is like, okay, which one's better? Like, do people prefer Viagra over Cialis, Sildenafil over Sildenafil, Tadalafil?
When I get to like my ED era, I'm definitely thinking of wanting to take Cialis every day.
What's your instinct? Yeah,
Cialis every day.
Okay,
I like
well,
that.
All right, this meta-analysis looked at 16 different studies that were comparing those drugs head to head and which one like
Head
performed
to
better.
head, I picture two cocks touching.
That's like a beautiful picture. No, I'm just like,
Whoa.
No, I'm joking. I was just trying to think of like a funny image in the studies of just like two dicks being like sildenafil versus.
Okay, you calling it beautiful?
Okay, over 5,000 patients, so we've got like a good sample size here. So both drugs are equally as effective, but tadalafil, which is Cialis, had a much stronger impact on patients' sexual confidence. They were more satisfied in general, and 9 out of 10 of these studies found that both men and their partners preferred tadalafil.
Okay, interesting.
And I wonder if it's because of that nature of not
It's like the
needing-
lack of like being like, oh, we're doing it now. 1 sec, let me
Yeah.
grab the pill.
Yeah, to just kind of have it in your system, and you probably almost forget, and then can just feel confident, like, oh my gosh, like I'm not thinking about my erection going away. And I think like having, again, we're not like promoting or encouraging this, but if you are suffering from erectile dysfunction, a lot of times, even if it didn't start as like a mental quote unquote problem or an anxiety problem, I think those things can rebound, right? Like if you're having ED, then your brain gets nervous, and now you have this like chain reaction that's only going to make it harder.
Yeah.
So by taking something like Cialis, you're helping to improve your own confidence. You can maybe like stop that like cycle in your brain, and now you have confidence, and that you're like your own brain can like reinforce the positive feelings and confidence around an erection
into
and
that.
maintaining that. So
I'm going to be getting Cialis by the bucket load soon. Okay, another thing about...
I do want to try it. I will. I've never
too.
tried either drug, and I think when I was young, I was like, not that I wanted to try it, but I was pictured Viagra just like giving you a constant boner, and was like, that's terrifying.
We
But
should try it and then have a part 2 where we just go like, we tried it.
We tried. Yeah,
Get ready with me as I try Cialis.
I'd do that for a YouTube video.
The moderate to severe ED prevalence was higher. This is a study about ED, and I just like thought it was interesting because it's also related to porn, which is like we've done a recent podcast about how porn's causing ED, so you can go listen to that. But like that's what a lot of researchers are thinking is happening, is that like the psychogenic effects in young people is watching too much porn and then not being able to maintain erections during normal sex, because they're like, literally it's not the same stimulus as the porn / they're used to just masturbating.
I would, like, from my personal experience, anecdotally say that tracks. It's like we're constantly seeing sexualized imagery even on social media, but then of course porn, and you're probably hyper sexualized. Like sometimes you see an Instagram image, it turns you on and it leads you to more imagery.
That is the craziest part. Or TikTok or Twitter. Yeah. It's like there's porn everywhere.
And then now if you're watching porn, it's so accessible that you're associating your arousal with very specific imagery, hyper stimulating imagery, that then if you orgasm to, it's like you're building associations around. And because of that, some people can't even climax inside of somebody else or in a condition where they're hooking up with someone, because it's not their like typical orgasm setup.
Also, like, go to our episode We're Insane on gooning, because we have a literal podcast episode on gooning, which is that like the way that people masturbate now with like all the tabs and Twitter. It's like, for those who don't know what gooning means, essentially means you're just like jerking off for a really long time, stimulating your brain. And it's like, Homo sapiens were not designed for this. Video coming out tomorrow on YouTube about all of this. But it was interesting. Rural dwellers, single people, divorcees, retirees and people with the lowest household income category had the highest level of ED. This is from a study. Private employees, self-employed employees, those who were not working, homemakers, students, and retirees also had the most ED. And I was kind of just like...
Wait, isn't that everyone? Wait, what was the first category?
Private employees, people who like work for themselves, or who essentially don't go to a company.
Okay.
Students, retirees, homemakers, so people who like are essentially just maybe like their wife or their partner is working and they're not. And then I was just like in my head like, wow, those are people with a lot of time to jerk off.
And they're more likely
and
to
watch
have
porn.
erectile dysfunction?
Yeah. It was literally like people who are self-employed versus people who have to probably go to an office and can't just like...
Interesting.
Like the work from home thing is like, are people... So since the pandemic, Pornhub visits have gone up 11.6% on average. That I'm like, there has to be some really interesting... Well, that is the research on like, if you're working from home, it's just like way easier to...
Temptation. It's the same thing of like just even going on social media, right? Like these things... You just need one little trigger to like be like, I need to check my phone, or I need to check TikTok, or I need to go and watch porn.
Or do whatever. Like it's like if you're at a cubicle or an office, you can't just like, even just going on Instagram, it's like, that's embarrassing and you can't.
It reminds me in this moment of the effective strategies for quitting smoking and how they realized it's literally the inconvenience. That's why it's like if you're not allowed to smoke inside, or you're not allowed to smoke outside 10 meters of a building, or you can't buy cigarettes and see them, it's like those barriers actually are the greatest help to quitting smoking.
Oh my God.
And so being in an office is just like that extra little barrier of like, well, I can't.
We got to regulate the shit
into the bathroom and hide or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas at home, you're like, there's no barrier. You just have access to it. No shame, no problem. Go. And so just, I don't know. That's just something that
we're living in hell. I'm so
hell.
negative. My arm is absolutely shattered. We are. I can't believe Mark Zuckerberg is like controlling everything. It's like, good frickin' God. We can't. Okay. We are going to try Cialis and we're going to get back to you.
Is there
Pride's coming up.
Like,
that shit's going to be like at every stall. Pride event.
Let's wrap up, I think just by, like, I think it's important to talk about this experience. I think we're both in our late 30s. And I think,
and I'm biking and shattering my gooch on the daily.
And it's something that's occurred to me. Like, I don't think I've never been like, I have erectile dysfunction, but as I've aged, I've noticed like, okay, it is like, it's different. It's harder. We even did the episode on cock rings. Okay, it's not harder.
It's softer.
It is in fact softer.
Yeah, true. Cock rings. It's like clearly if someone was studying our like psychology through our podcasts, they'd be like, they have ED.
Or they're obsessed with dicks.
Yeah, or both.
But I just think like, hopefully these kind of conversations, because it's so prevalent, even in people who don't have quote unquote erectile dysfunction, I think worry about these things, think about these things, want to be sexually confident, and not to sit here and try and promote drugs, but I think even outside of the drugs, like knowing that many people experience this and that there's ways to probably even like work through therapy.
La Fel.
Yeah. But you know, a lot of it's mental, and if it's not mental, it's chemical, and it's like it's okay to know that, and to have support from partners who also know that it's not their fault. Like I'm sure there could be insecurity around someone being like, "Am I not turning you on?" And that can probably also cause a spiral. So,
and it's just crazy. It's like there's a crisis of male sexuality, a crisis of erectile dysfunction, and we need to talk about it. And I'm just like, God damn, it's probably so related to social media.
I think the one thing that I casually mentioned up front, but I do think it's worth mentioning, like just like generally stress and the way that we're engaged with like the capitalist world. And we even talk about, I don't know, people I think in general are more stressed. I even did my video on perfectionism, and it's like it used to be a single digit percentage of people who were diagnosed with perfectionism, and now it's like gone skyrocketed, and it's just like there's this
but I think
extra
it's
pressure.
I think it's so social
totally
media.
It's our perspective on what we should be, who we should be, what we should have.
Like
and
perfectionism is probably so impact. You just see people's like perfect lives,
exactly,
hustle culture, working so hard, blah blah blah.
But in a culture where also even now more than ever, it's like so many people are struggling even financially, like that pressure on if you're not perfect, you will struggle in that way. You're trying to like work your way out of that to be able to afford living in all these places that are so freaking expensive now. Everything costs
We
so
always
much.
end all of our episodes by going into like late stage capitalism and just being
well, it's like all these
the
are
reason
linked.
for
All these
everything.
issues are definitely linked. But I think
Late stage capitalism is ruining your cock. Maybe that's like what we need to start
that's
saying.
how we'll solve. At least
We'll get
rally the
such
crowds.
backlash if we say that. Anyways, but it's true. IMO. Okay, so we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and talk about jerking off before bed.
Oh, yes. So, yeah, should you have sex or masturbate before bed? That's the question.
Ding.
Okay, see you in a bit.